So that Dr. Harvey Kleiman that I mentioned at Yale, he developed a technique called EPV, estimated placental volume. And it's a technique that it's literally taking a measurement on ultrasound, which makes sense to ask for like your anatomy scan. It's just another measurement. It literally takes 30 seconds. Every ultrasound appointment I had with my third daughter, Jersey, after that anatomy scan, they measured her placenta at it, which was really cool. And it's really easy and simple. So just a background is I am just a lost mom sharing my lived experience and my passion for empowering moms. I don't have the science background. I don't have the math background. I don't have the physics. But when you look at a placenta on the ultrasound and you get it in a certain frame of view on that ultrasound, the sonographer will measure like end to end, the length, the width, and the height of it. And then those three measurements are plugged into equation. And there is a free phone app on both Android and Apple stores called Merwin's EPV calculator. And so those measurements, if the ultrasound tech takes those measurements, you put them in there, and then it will calculate the percentile size of that placenta. So it will compare baby's gestational age along with like the normative curves of other placentas that have been studied and researched, and then it will kind of plot it there. Tying it back, I mentioned very much at the beginning of at least probably the first part of our podcast recording is that I studied abroad in Senegal, which is in West Africa, when I was in college. And since getting involved with Measure the Placenta and getting to know Dr. Harvey Kleiman's research, he actually had a grad student several years ago collect placenta data measurement in Senegal, in Dakar, the city where I lived, which is just wild. If you can imagine, a very different socioeconomical status there, very different landscape. Like when I lived there, we didn't have a flushing toilet. We had to buy bottled water, things like that. And it was very interesting looking at the data of this grad student measuring placenta sizes in Senegal matched up with curve from data in like say Boston in Norway. It showed that there is a very norm for placenta sizes to exist, and they are not changed by these other factors, which I just think is really cool and really just like goes to show how important looking at what a normal placenta size should be and what it should be in relation to the baby. So since it is not yet a standard of care to measure the placenta, like I said, it's always a good idea to ask for it at the anatomy scan. Both our website, measuretheplacenta.org, and Dr. Kleiman's website at Yale has multiple resources for a sonographer to learn how to do this technique. Printable PDF guides that list step by step of like what to have the settings at and things like that in order to get the like correct, accurate picture of the placenta size and how to like measure each point. There's also tutorial videos of seeing MFM doctor doing it in real time on a pregnant patient. And so there's all sorts of good resources there. So if a provider is like, I don't know how to do that, I've never done that before, point them to the website. Dr. Kleiman is always available to answer questions, to offer trainings and things like that. Be prepared if you do advocate for this, you will probably encounter pushback because it is not yet standard of care, but it also is a very reasonable ask to be made, especially if you've had a prior loss. If you are not sure why your baby has died, I highly recommend looking into getting a placental review done, like one by Dr. Kleiman or anyone else out there. The placenta, more often than not, can provide answers as to why a baby has died, why a baby was stillborn. Way more often, the placenta is able to give information as to the cause of a baby's death, especially compared to an autopsy. Autopsies usually show very little information, but the placenta is where information can be found. So if you are not yet pregnant again or want to become pregnant, I highly recommend having a placental review done so that you can best prepare yourself for a future pregnancy and best advocate for yourself and your babies in the future. You'll often hear like ACOG does from doctors, ACOG doesn't tell us to do it. And so our group has sent over 6,000 letters in the last few years to ACOG, which is the governing board of obstetrics and gynecology in the United States. We're asking them to pay attention to placenta size as a risk factor for stillbirth and other poor birth outcomes. We are also working with different like sonography boards and things like that. We have available on our website informational pamphlet or brochure that moms can request and can send to their providers. Also recommend sending the EPV info over via MyChart if you have that with your provider. That way your request will be documented. And if they don't already, if they say they're not going to measure your baby's placenta, you can ask that they also chart that you made this request and that they decline to take this measurement. Like I said, it's a very simple, non-invasive. If you're already doing an ultrasound, easy to do on that regular 2D ultrasound. It does not require any extra special imaging or anything like that. So it's a very, like we like to say, a low-hanging fruit of the prenatal care that we would be. It's just another data point. It's another tool in the toolbox. To make a sports analogy, like not knowing the size of a placenta in pregnancy is kind of like not having like your shot clock. You don't know how much time is left in order to score. You don't have the clock, the game clock, to know how much steam you've got to get to the end. You're just shooting baskets blindly, like you have no idea. Knowing the size of a placenta in pregnancy is just another helpful tool, a little window into assessing the pregnancy and the baby to the end of the pregnancy with the most positive outcome, the most healthy, of course, alive, hopefully. We like to say to advocate for it in the anatomy scan if the placenta at that point is either too large or too small or is not in a good ratio to the baby. We recommend asking to check to monitor the size of the placenta just as you would monitor the size of the baby, so every 3 to 4 weeks on ultrasound. We would love to see third trimester ultrasounds just be standard, but we also say that in any case in the third trimester, if a mother reports decreased fetal movement, it would be a very helpful tool to check on the size of the placenta. OBGYN really comes down to, at the end of the pregnancy of making the call of in or out. Is baby safer staying in or getting out? And like Junie's case with IUGR, that she was being restricted by her environment to continue growing. So getting her out at that point might have led to some NICU time, but it would have saved her life, if that makes sense. And so like when it comes to placenta size and knowing other risk factors, knowing other complications that are already affecting your pregnancy, having the placenta size as another data point can be helpful at like painting an entire picture of the pregnancy rather than like flying blind and leaving it up to chance. That's why placenta size is so important.
And thank you for sharing all that, because once again, it is very eye-opening for people like myself and those tuning in, especially having gone through loss myself. And after listening to you too, it kind of makes me a little bit freaked out in a way, in the sense that you have been saying, right? Like I was going to MFM, like you're thinking you have the best care and you're getting looked at, you're getting everything checked out. So what are the odds that something's going to happen to my baby, So like in my case too, I'm over here thinking that my next pregnancy going to MFM, it's going to be like my security blanket. But at the same time, I guess all of us are learning through this process that there's no real way to control the final outcome. Who's in control of the final outcome? Is it your doctor? Is it God? Is it luck? There's so much that goes into you as the mom coming out healthy and alive. And then the baby, it's a miracle coming out healthy and alive. And before we started recording, Amanda and I actually were saying to each other, when you're a kid and you're going through sex ed and doing all these things and learning about condoms and learning about how a baby is made, you just think you have sex, a man looks at you, you're pregnant, and you get a baby. When in reality, that definitely is not the case. I mean, you can have multiple losses, you can have a stillbirth, your baby could be born and have SIDS, like we can go on and on and on. It is not Disney World, fantasy world when it comes to having a baby. For some women, yes, of course, women can have 3, 4, 5 babies. And I don't know if they're just like the lucky ones or what it is, but I would say it's very rare that women have no complications at all during pregnancy. And by no complications at all, I mean, some women might only experience extreme nausea. Others might have cramping. Others might have preeclampsia or whatever the case may be, gestational diabetes. But then you have some women like Amanda, where sadly their baby is dealing with growth restriction, or somebody in my case, where you're dealing with loss of movement and the doctors aren't looking further into it. I know we have to kind of wrap up. I know Amanda has been beautiful on here, spending close to 2 hours worth of time with me, and I appreciate that time. You can head to measuretheplacenta.org. Once again, that is measuretheplacenta.org. If you yourself want to learn more information on this topic, whether it be you having previously experienced a stillbirth, or if you just want to learn about this topic for yourself, if you want to have more babies, or you want to send it to your friends that are currently pregnant or thinking about getting pregnant, I think it is great to empower ourselves, because to be honest with you, I never even thought about looking into measuring the placenta until I came across this Instagram page, and I probably only found it through like hashtag stillbirth.
Talking about how I had to find answers by talking to other lost moms who listen to a podcast, it's a very unfair burden. And so just to quickly mention, a lot of what our community is also doing is working to make systemic change. So like we want to get the EPV measurements as a standard part of prenatal care so that every pregnant person gets their baby's placenta measured so that this risk factor can be identified. We've also worked this past year, we got the first ever stillbirth prevention legislation passed at the federal level, signed into law in July of 2024 by President Biden, including the word stillbirth in the Title V funding to states so that those public health dollars can be put towards stillbirth prevention, which is huge. And there's quite a few other advocacy campaigns going on right now. So feel free, if you click around on our website or on our social media, and we share a lot of other partner organizations, Count the Kick and Push for Empowered Pregnancy. Those are huge partners of ours, also working to prevent stillbirth through very simple tools like awareness and education. So we always need like signatures on petitions there, just things like that. And just really, this comes down to like if you're having a conversation with another pregnant person, to just spread the awareness that monitoring their movements is the best way to advocate for your baby. And that's what your nurses are there for. They are there for you to go in anytime you need to get checked in order to get your baby here healthy and alive. Sharing that awareness that they don't run out of room, they don't slow down. Just those little conversations really add up to be very huge, and they can be life-saving. And one more quick thing to end on, I think you had asked about this at the beginning and we didn't quite get to it, is wondering how this stuff can impact lives. And yesterday was a very special girl's birthday. Her name is Margot. She lives in Ohio, and she is here celebrating her 4 years of life as a direct result of Juniper sharing advocacy and awareness. Her mom had reached out to me. Margot was her third daughter, or not third daughter, excuse me, third child. And she reached out to me one night and she was like, I'm 34 weeks pregnant. I don't think my baby's moving like she should. I just had an appointment. They said everything is fine. I feel crazy, but I can't shake Junie's story. I'm going to go in and get checked. And the next day, Margot was born via emergency C-section with a true knot in her cord, which was explaining why over several days her movements were slowing down and why she suddenly fell off the monitors. So this past spring, I got to meet Margot and her mom, Kathleen, in person for the first time, and there was not a dry eye in the room. Just really special to have Junie's legacy living on in such a direct way, and like to see that this can save lives. These simple tools, kit counting and checking placenta size, can save lives and can improve pregnancy outcomes.
That was such a beautiful story. And thank you for sharing all of that, including Margot, Junie, your family at large, me being able to talk about my son Jordan's story and my current journey of trying to conceive, and all of that high pressure that I am under, and nerves and also excitement that comes into potentially birthing again in the future. Having people in my corner like Amanda and the other lost moms and my husband and grief therapists, and having all these people and tools in your back corner like maternal fetal medicine, and being very open with your OB after such a significant, sad loss like a stillbirth is very important moving forward, not only for you and your healing, but your family. And if you want other living, breathing children, you need to have those tools and resources in your back corner, or back pocket, should I say. As we wrap up, once again, guys, at Measure the Placenta, check them out on Instagram. Again, lots of great content and resources. Amanda and her other colleagues are very much so into answering their DMs and emails. I find them both to be very friendly. They will be in touch with you when they can. Obviously, they have their own families to tend to, but they get back to you in a very timely manner, which is amazing. Also, once again, measuretheplacenta.org for more information. And again, please continue to share these stories and these journeys. Share out this podcast episode or these podcast episodes if you find them informative and you want other moms to know about these topics. I think part of our healing and loss journey is to continue bringing awareness to everything that we are experiencing. And again, as we wrap up this very informative and raw, multiple part podcast special, I want to thank you, Amanda, for joining me. I know we are both making our children up in heaven very proud and bringing awareness to such a painful yet beautiful topic. I'd love to have you back on here in the future, as I've mentioned. And as we fully wrap up, any last words that you would like to say on the topic of stillbirth, Junie, healing, grief, what would you like to say? And you are going to have the final comments here on this podcast special.
I would say count your kick, measure the placenta, and keep loving your babies, even though they're not here anymore with us.